There have been a lot of pro wrestling families. Way too many to count. Some have been massive successes, some not so much. One of the families that you can talk about is the Flair family. Ric Flair is one of the best wrestlers of all time, in some people's opinions. And his daughter Charlotte is also starting to prove that trend in the women's division. But there's another wrestling Flair that gets a lot of criticism, and that is David Flair. David Flair had spells in WCW, a couple of appearances in WWE, and a brief run in TNA. And he got absolutely slated in his time with all of the companies. Many people online say that he is one of the worst wrestlers of all time. But is he really? So I'm going to do a little video on why I think that it's unfair to say that David Flair is the worst wrestler of all time. And maybe the criticism needs to be put into a little bit of context here.
David Flair gets a lot of flack because he had big shoes to fill. He's the son of Ric Flair, who was classed as one of the greatest of that generation, and generations after and after. I don't think he was bad. He was badly trained because people thought he's Ric Flair's son, he's going to go places. But we've seen this through the years with Bruno Sammartino and David Sammartino. He was nowhere near as good as his dad. Just like with all the Nepo babies in wrestling just now, are they better than their parents? Some of them are, some of them weren't. But with David Flair, he didn't have a chance. He was never going to go anywhere because I don't think he wanted to wrestle. You could see that that's not where he wanted to be. So I think he's underrated because he didn't want it. But he wasn't bad. He wasn't good, but he wasn't bad.
Like my colleague Kevin has just mentioned, there are a lot of wrestlers that haven't been able to live up to the expectations of their wrestling parents. Whenever you're the kid of someone who's in an established field, no matter what it is, they instantly think that you're going to have the same skills and the same mantle as your parents. It happens in every industry, but when it comes to entertainment and especially professional wrestling, that Nepo baby tag is always going to be there. No matter what you do and no matter what you try to do to step out of the shadow of it. So David didn't have a chance from the get-go. It's also pretty evident that David didn't want to be a wrestler. As a matter of fact, he always wanted to be a state trooper. The first time he appeared on TV was in Starrcade 93, and then he was asked back in 1998 to become part of the Eric Bischoff New World Order feud that was going on, and then eventually decided to debut with his father at WCW NWO Sold Out January 1999, wrestling Curt Hennig and Barry Windham. So he was in the ring with very experienced and very competent professional wrestlers that would be able to help him hold his own in the ring. At a build height of 6'1" and weighing 177 pounds, Flair had the right frame and size to be a part of wrestling, and was with WCW until 2001, after which he toured the independent circuits, teamed with Don Factor to win the NWA World Tag Team Championships, and then teamed with Romeo Bliss to win the NWA Georgia Tag Team Championships. In May 2001, WWE picked up David Flair's contract and sent him down to OVW, where he feuded with Val Venus and had a brief tag team with Mark Jindrak in 2002. Late 2002 they dropped his contract, but did make two brief WWE TV appearances in 2002 to tie in with his father's feud leading up to WrestleMania 18. In 2003 he did a series of dark matches for Sunday Night Heat and Velocity, and even in 2006 he lost to William Regal in a dark match. Not to mention that in between that time, Flair had a stint in TNA between 2002 and 2003, joining Vince Russo's Sports Entertainment Extreme Group, or SEX. Once again, he had a feud with Curt Hennig, and with Brian Lawler and Eric Watts, they feuded with Dusty Rhodes. His later career from 2003 to 2009 included spells at the IWA, winning the Intercontinental Championship from Ray Gonzalez. In 2005, he appeared at All Japan Pro Wrestling. In 2008, he wrestled with his half-brother Reed, who was then starting to make his professional wrestling debut, defeating the Nasty Boys, with Hulk Hogan as a special guest referee. So many people know him just from WCW, but based on that, he had quite a storied and varied journeyman career in his own right. And at one time, Pro Wrestling Illustrated ranked him as 168 in the top 500 singles wrestlers in the PWI 500 in 2002. People may think that that's a bit on the low scale, but 168 out of 500 wrestlers it certainly ain't no slouch.
This is my views on David Flair. He was a character, so he was unique back in the day. He was, let's be honest. Like, I think he managed to get into WCW just for the sheer fact who his dad was, the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. Woo! His time in WCW wasn't the best in my eyes because I just felt like it was cringy watching him because he kept on mucking up every move. It just looked like he wasn't trained properly, as what Kev says. Like, fast forward a few years in WWE, he's getting trained with the proper help. He ends up feuding with The Undertaker. I think that was maybe his best work with The Undertaker. And it still baffles me that John Cena, you probably won't, but John Cena stole David Flair's look. Check it out. The Undertaker match on SmackDown. But anyways, that's my views on him. David Flair, I feel like if he was still about the day, I do think he would have been well known. But it'd have been like Nick Hogan. It'd have been like Hulk Hogan's son. It'd just be a passing name. But I could be wrong. This was my views on David Flair. So let's get what you think, folks. I'd be wrong, I'd be right.
A lot of people have criticisms about David Flair. They didn't like his in-ring work, struggled to pick up the basics. I feel like he only got title shots and championship reigns because of his famous surname. I'm not debating these points. I've personally watched quite a few of David Flair's matches when thinking about doing this video. And while he's not the greatest, he is nowhere near the worst wrestler that I have seen perform. And I think one of the reasons why he got the opportunities that he did wasn't just because of his father's last name. Many people have spoke about David in glowing terms for his attitude, his work rate, how respectful he was in the locker room, and he was also favoured very highly by Vince Russo. And at a time in wrestling where your attitude was pretty much the polar opposite if you wanted to get anywhere in the business, I'm sure that David's attitude would have been a breath of fresh air to any booker or any promoter. Someone that wanted to do the job, that was willing to learn, and was willing to try his best no matter what. Because I've heard several complaints about his wrestling. Never once heard a complaint about his attitude. Never once heard a complaint about his professionalism. Matter of fact, that's probably the most glowing terms that you can get. And that's probably why he got so many shots that he did. Probably not because of his father's name. You look at Ric Flair, hell, you even look at Charlotte, and a lot of people think that they're not the nicest people in real life. From the sounds of it, David Flair sounds like a stand-up guy, someone that you would love to talk to. I know I'd like to talk to him about his professional wrestling days. And a lot of people slate his build as well, saying that he didn't have the physique for a wrestler. But the physiques of wrestlers are essentially gods among men. They're the abnormality rather than the exception. You look at some of the wrestlers in that time period, late 90s through the early 2000s, before the steroids were really starting to get cracked down again, everybody was roided out their nut. And then you see someone like David who's got an average build and he gets slated for it. I don't think that's fair. I always related to the underdog characters or the wrestlers that maybe didn't fit that mould. One of my favourite wrestlers was Spike Dudley. Brunt of the litter, didn't look like a wrestler, but could take one hell of a beating and knew his way around the ropes. David is a similar kind of, for lack of a better term, flair about him. In a world where you couldn't really identify with any of the wrestlers, if you were a guy like me, I would gravitate to David, because it felt like it was someone that I could relate to. A guy just trying to do his best in a very unnatural environment. Now in WCW, he won the United States title and the WCW Tag Team Championships with Crowbar. Do I think he deserved the US title? My own personal opinion is no, because no matter what industry you're in, you need to pay your dues. And at that time, I don't think he had paid his dues yet. But do I think the tag team titles are deserved? Yes, I do. I think his partnership with Crowbar was a great pairing, because you had a more experienced hand in Crowbar that could guide him through, and then they had the manager Valley and Daphne, who was absolutely amazing in her psycho shtick. I think they're very underrated as a little unit. The legacy of David Flair is always going to be one that sparks debate among wrestling fans. A lot of people will say that he was a nepo baby that was handed opportunities that other, better, more technically skilled wrestlers would absolutely die to have, and was given chance after chance just because of his last name. But with a lot of his wrestling career, aside from WCW, and a couple of appearances in WWE, David Flair did the work on his own. He was at promotions that his father wasn't at, trying to make a name for himself in the business, probably feeling like he had to carry the load for the Flair name. And that's a pressure that no child should be put under. Thankfully now, David is no longer involved in wrestling. He seems very happy, just living a life out with the spotlight. And they have their next generation Flair and Charlotte. I personally think that people need to lay off David Flair a little bit in terms of his wrestling career. If it's something that your heart wasn't in, and no matter how much you tried, it was never going to be, it's just not going to work out for you. But the fact that he did it for so long, putting his body through a lot of punishment, and still picked up some titles along the way, maybe we should give him a bit more of his due.